Yeah.
Yeah. I'll get it to her.
Yeah, she's pretty essential to this meeting.
Yes. Sharon, are you sending it?
Oh, no, I did not send it. I can.
Oh, I can. I'm already in it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I'm sending it. Oh, I was just hearing the YouTube live stream at the same time.
Okay, so
Adrienne should be on her way. I think
Good.
the best way to do this whole new thing with the Zoom link, I send out the meeting materials in one email, and then the Outlook calendar invite goes out to members and all interested parties. And then the Zoom invite, I email that. So if you have the calendar invite on your calendar, and at the time when you receive the email, I would just copy and paste that into my calendar.
Right.
It all goes out at the same time. So hopefully that is at least a little bit helpful.
Yeah, that I think that's good advice.
Yeah.
Just working out the kinks of communication, aren't we?
So I think Adrienne arrived.
Okay.
Barb is here.
Barb is here. Okay. I can only see a few of you. How do I make this?
I don't know if Joe will be here. I would say let's go ahead and get started. It's 3:05 by the time we get through the virtual statement.
Okay, yes, thank you all. I am filling in for Chet Parsons today. He's ended up being double booked. So I'm Barbara Jaycox with Plan RVA, of course, working with my right hand here, my left hand, and my head as well, Nicole Mueller. So I really appreciate her being here. I'm going to start by opening the meeting with our statement for electronic meetings. Due to the 2020 COVID-19 virus and current guidance regarding physical distancing to reduce the potential for spread, meetings of the Richmond Regional Planning District Commission have transitioned to a virtual format in accordance with provisions of the Virginia Code 22-3708.2 and related legislation approved by the General Assembly of Virginia during the period of the governor's state of emergency declaration for COVID-19. While we meet in a remote virtual format, we remain committed to public accessibility and opportunity to participate. Staff provided notice of this meeting to members and the public on October 26, 2020, through the electronic posting on the Plan RVA website, and email distribution of notice to members, alternates, and known interested parties, including the media. This meeting will be recorded. Audio and visual recordings of the meeting and materials will be posted on the Plan RVA website within 48 hours of this meeting. Any members of the public participating as an observer during the meeting today may submit comments or questions at any time prior to or during the meeting via email at RRTPO input@planrva.org. All comments and questions submitted at this time will be reviewed following the meeting to the extent practical. Responses will be provided or posted on the RVA website. We ask that members identify themselves first when speaking so we can be more accurately record the activities of the meeting. All lines should be muted to minimize additional noise and feedback. You may unmute your line at any time to request acknowledgement from the chair. Does anyone have any questions regarding the process for assuring effective facilitation of this meeting or how members of the public may participate? By reading the statement, staff certifies that we have followed the approved procedures for appropriate notice of this meeting and the means by which we are convening. Now, please indicate your presence by saying "here" when your name is called during a roll call. Anyone who wishes to identify themselves following the roll call of members will be invited to do so. Well, thank you, Nicole.
Thanks, Barb. I'll start with Chesterfield County, Ms. Smith.
Here.
City of Richmond, Ms. Clark.
Here.
Hanover County, Mr. Vidunas. Henrico County, Ms. Smidler.
Here.
SeaTac, Ms. Guthrie.
Here.
DRPT, Ms. Dubinsky. GRTC, Ms. Torres. Plan RVA, Mr. Lance. And Ride Finders, Mr. O'Keefe.
Aye.
Thank you. I think Emily is joining us today.
Yes, Emily Del Ross.
Emily,
Yes.
can you hear us? Thank you.
Very good.
All right, Barb, that concludes the roll call for attendance.
And you can see in front of you the agenda. Are there considerations for amendments to the agenda? And hearing or seeing none, we'll move forward by consensus and look at the October 5th meeting summary, which is located in your packet, and it should be on your screen as well. Do you have any suggestions or amendments to the meeting minutes from October 5th? Am I scrolling adequately for you to? Okay. Do we have review and consensus on the meeting minutes from October 5th? Any suggestions or additions? All right, so by consensus, we accept those meeting minutes from October 5th. And now it is time for us to move on to the scope consensus. Here is an overview of the draft scope that you all have provided input to. And we're going to allow, of course, any questions, and I'll direct most of those to Adrian. Adrian, do you want to review it quickly? I am just beaming in for the first time and not having attended your meeting on the 5th or in the interim.
I think Adrian's having some mic problems. I think she's trying to call in.
When she does hook in, I think I would benefit from just an overview.
Okay. I think, yeah, it is looking like she's still trying to tie in. connecting. She's connecting. Still connecting.
Barb, perhaps
any-
do you want to update the group on the review, the action taken by the CVTA on Friday?
Yes, I can. At the request of Julie Tim, the CVTA board, which met on Friday, was asked by GRTC. They requested and recommended that the CVTA Finance Committee and Board approve the use of the CVTA transit funds not to exceed $200,000 for consulting services and public outreach support in the development of the FY22 Regional Transit Plan, and reserve the remainder of the FY21 dedicated transit funds in reserve as to be used at such time the plans are complete.
I think
And that was
I'm
approved by the board. Right, Adrian?
Here. Am I here?
Yes, I can hear you on your phone.
Oh my gosh, I'm just gonna throw my computer across the screen. All right. Sorry about that. I guess my audio on my computer wasn't working, and then anyway. So an update on, I guess, what's happened since we last met as far as the scope of work. After we met last, I think there was one comment, I believe it was from Dorona, about kind of like the timing. And so I did make an edit to the end date for the plan. So originally it was, I think, the end of June or July 1st is what we had as the timeline. I changed that to the end of March because that better works with everyone else's budget. So as the jurisdictions are working with their budgets as well as GRTC's developing their budgets, having that idea ahead of time will help us. So I did make that change. We did put the scope of work out for, we actually contacted 2 consultants off of the DRPT contract. That was Kimberly Horn and Baker. They did both get back to us on Friday, and I reviewed both of them this morning. And I can actually bring this over and maybe share it with you guys. Briefly go over what they both proposed. Our recommendation is to move forward with the Baker contract. Kimberly Horn is teaming up with Kinetics for theirs as their sub, and then Baker is teaming up as their sub with Jarrett Walker. So I'll go ahead and share my screen if you guys want to look through different scopes with me and review the different points and what they proposed. See if you guys kind of had any recommendations, any tweaks you would recommend, or if you guys kind of have the same consensus as we move forward with next steps. So I'm going to share my screen.
I'm looking to make sure I could stop sharing.
Adrian, I think if you just want to go ahead and share your screen, I think I have it set up to where it automatically ends the previous.
Okay, good.
Was sharing,
because
so
I'm not seeing where mine can go away.
there we go.
Can you guys see my PDF?
Yes. Can you make it a little bit larger? Perfect.
Yes, definitely.
Yes. Awesome.
All right. Okay, so this one is the Kimberly Horn proposal. All right, just to briefly go over what we were kind of looking at for scope was to review GRTC's current network, reviewing our data over the past few years as far as routes, also looking at the studies that have been done, whether it's TDP, the Transit Vision Plans Phase 2, and any other relevant studies that are out there related to transit. Looking at those and coming up with a list of kind of recommendations that we've already given feedback to for kind of a phased approach. Also looking at our finances and looking at the revenue sources, how that will change GRTC, as far as having now CBTA funds, looking at our current cost allocation model, the way that the various jurisdictions also give funding, as well as maybe recommendations on how the allocation should be done for CBTA, and also related to grants, our current grant process, what we applied for, if there's any other opportunities out there that we could apply for, looking at capital for our current network, as well as any expansion, and then coming up with 2 alternatives by the end of December, and then eventually honing in on a final recommendation that could be phased in with our current network and any sort of enhancements that we all kind of agree upon. All right, so this is just kind of giving a background on Kimley Horn. They worked with us on RTMP in terms of the kinetics, did the scheduling in that contract. They, of course, did the Route 1 corridor study with Chesterfield for that service. They did the BRT design services and engineering, and then some non-GRT specific projects that they worked on listed here. And then they get into the staffing, like I said, is a mixture of Kimley Horn as well as Kinetics. And Kinetics, like I said, did work with us on our network redesign for our schedule, so we are familiar with them, and they worked with the Route 1 project as well. So going.
Barb,
Yeah.
this is Lisa Guthrie. Can you tell us who the consultant was for the Plan RVA's second phase of the regional transit plan?
Yeah, yes, that was Kimley Horn and Kinetics.
Oh, thank you.
So this just goes over project understanding, giving some background on the scope, coming the money for related to the CBTA, and looking at our transit strategic plan in the effort to eventually use this to build one in the future. Their approach is to work with Kinetics, do a decent amount of project management and outreach. And I can send it to you guys after so you can read it in more detail. Have a kickoff meeting in the beginning, really to fine-tune the details of what the project management looks like, working with GRTC in coordination, 20 meetings, working with the transportation work group, which is us, at least 3 meetings of those, and additional outreach and stakeholder meetings with deliverables. So like I said in the scope, they talk about planning context, looking at transit trends and analysis. They talk a lot about demographic data and looking at growth related to that. They already have a lot of the information, like Barbara just said, from the Phase 2 network from the vision plan. So they talk on using that same information to look at our current system for that and looking at expansion efforts related to that. Also looking at all of this in light of the current pandemic and how that's impacted. And then they get into the financial scenario analysis, and they talk about coming up with 2 different financial scenarios depending on which alternative we pick for moving forward with the phased approach. With estimating the operating costs related to both. And then developing the actual service plan concepts and doing an evaluation of them and outreach. And then they talk about using RRTPO to look at the standards we already have in place and making sure that those fit with the right ones for evaluating the plan for success. And then looking also at any capital needs related to the current service. And then the final plan. So that is the one for Kimley Horn, and then they'll make it by March 31st, 2020. Any specifics for that particular one? Want me to go back to any specific section if anyone has any questions? All right, I'll move over to the Baker study. Like I said, Baker is going to be doing this in coordination with Jarrett Walker, and both groups did our Richmond Transit, the network redesign, and they also did the Henrico County redesign that was both bled into our TDP, and they actually also did our TDP. So they're very familiar with all of our service, currently how it is, as well as the standards that are in the TDP, as well as all of the enhancements that are listed with it. And then Baker, of course, did the first iteration of the Transit Vision Plan Phase 2, or Phase 1. So they're familiar with that process and everything that's in it as well. All right. It just explains the understanding for the project, the tight timeline, and the CBTA funds. They also talk about how the jurisdictions also did kind of reinvestment related to the dollars for using their 50% differently, so that the 15% can go towards the jurisdiction or going towards transit. I talk about what we've talked about before when we first started this working group, as far as how to define regional routes, working with you guys, the working group on that, discussing what those definitions would be, how we delineate between them, and how that would actually tie into an allocation model if that's the path that we choose to go down. Doing cost allocation updates, particularly looking at the city of Richmond, and that particular version they have, and then how Henrico County is different. They also talked about a lot of the conversation out there with related to the pandemic. People are considering doing zero fares. So looking at how that could impact GRTC if we continue down that path, or if we bring fares back, which is nice to look at different alternatives related to that. And then looking at also capital improvement.
Adrian.
Yes.
This is Diana. If you could go back up to that section there. I think that one of the things fundamentally that the city of Richmond has stated is that while we don't use a standard cost allocation model, we have been the financial resource for over 40 years for GRTC, and that the consideration of equity credit needs to be addressed if we are going to look at standard cost allocation amongst those who contribute to the system.
Yeah, I think that we can definitely incorporate that in the financial conversation. I mean, that will be part of the allocation. I mean, there's more revenue sources that may be the part that goes towards the expenses of the city of Richmond, but like you just said, yes, I mean, there's a chicken and egg situation with all of that and the finance allocation with it. So, yeah, you mentioned that before. We'll make sure that stays in the conversation as we continue.
Yeah, and I don't, and again, we look at it as something that is, again, 40 years worth. So as long as we are understanding our viewpoint on that, then, and as well as we currently are in a grant relationship, I just think that, again, the recommendations are going to come up against a lot of fundamental structural issues that I just don't know with the recommendation, if without talking with us and really coming to a conclusion of what and how we're going to approach it, that this plan can propose or recommend.
Right. I think this is going to be, I mean, you weren't here for the redesign, but a lot of it was definitely a group effort in terms of you bring what you have to the table, we'll bring what we have, so that we can work together and really come up with a plan that does work for all the jurisdictions. And I do like, I guess, that kind of methodology or scope to go with that. So you're going to be included in all the conversations as well, to certain levels.
And again, I thank you. And I just want you to know that it's definitely bigger than just me, is what I'm trying to.
Oh,
include.
yeah.
Mhm.
But I mean, Dorona, I think it will be interesting. I mean, we've always, I mean, not just this particular aspect. I mean, GRTC, all the relationships we had, there are things that have always been that way. And some of them aren't necessarily even like written out in terms of this has been done X, Y, Z to get to this. It's more like we've done it this way, it balances, let's continue. I mean, maybe I think in them documenting exactly the way things are broken down and then coming up with alternatives, we can see how, I mean, it goes into the future with actually supporting this growth.
Yeah, and I think that the other localities that contribute will of course have to have a part in it, because what equates to, you have what is the operational cost, and then what equates to credit to us equates to potentially higher cost to them. So
right. Yes. Oh no, it's all a working relationship together.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yes, yes. Yeah, we want to break it down to see what we've been doing. I think is very important, and see how, I mean, we've kind of tried it, you've seen it, we've broken it down ourselves, really looked at it, but I would like to see someone else, a third party, also do that and then come up with some recommendations that may be more supportive in the future that really do support also growth.
Awesome.
All right, and they just remember that from when because they did the TDP and already looked at our finances, or we gave them a certain amount of service hours to look at that were City of Richmond specific for doing the redesign. So they already have that background information. So I think that's why they really honed in on that. Keystone Approach, I'm gonna kind of go with that. So they're really big, I'm just gonna highlight it, but they're really, I guess, explaining every step as they put it, but go back and forth, really big on communicating with it the whole time, lots of visuals, lots of engaging. The way they did in the past with the redesign, they hit different levels, whether it's GRTC themselves or stakeholders or the jurisdictions, knowing who to talk to and getting the right material to really explain it. That goes with it, facts from judgments, making sure that the right information is out there to explain. All right, proposed task. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just had one more question. Well, I probably have a couple more, but this one was in regard to, as it was earlier, and I don't know if it was in the previous consultants or this one, but in regard to the CBTA and localities outside of your current service area, as I know we are staying within the confines of the TSP, I just wondered what questions, I know we didn't have any human service plan of the localities that are within the CBTA included kind of in the gap analysis. Potentially some of that may lead way to looking at future services and gaps that exist in those areas. And then have we thought about, or will we address anything as it comes to the questions that will come from some of the CBTA members that are contributing that are not being represented in this plan?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that will be incorporated, and we'll be mindful of all of that. I mean, like we talked about before, whether it's them having a placeholder in the future or finding something that fits them in the short term. I think the conversation still has to be there to make sure they're incorporated in some level in the plan. And I mean, that is part of the scope as well. And they do get into that in here, whether it's, I can't remember what section it is, but they talk about different types of modes and also get a little bit more into Spectrum.
And then my final question, when you're looking at, I saw them looking at they look a lot at the cost, models for actually deciding how the costs are derived, but will they also be looking at fleet size and really diversifying that for areas that we may want more frequency but does not require 50-foot buses? Is it going to really look into leveraging the funds that way as well?
Yeah, and GRTC on their own, we've already started having conversations about that for routes that may never have the demand for seat capacity of a 40-foot bus. If we could diversify our fleet to have a little bit more for that variety. So we've already started that conversation, and they will continue that in their effort to look at different types of transportation.
That would be great. Thank you.
Hey, Adrian.
Yes.
Did you send the scopes out to everyone?
The scope itself.
Yeah, what you're going through?
Oh, the proposals.
Yeah.
I have not. Do you want me to go ahead and send them right now?
That would be
I was
good.
going to send them after the meeting, and you
That's
guys can
fine.
review them on your own.
After's good.
Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought that would be good.
Yeah. All right. So stakeholder outreach is big for them. Looking at our existing network, assessment of existing plans, existing conditions report, financial and scenario analysis, going over everything I went in, cost and revenue analysis. They're also going to look at projections related to the funding in the future, which is nice. Grant opportunities assessments. And then they'll do a financial evaluation of the preferred concept, also looking at the cost allocation model we decide to move forward with, and how that fits. And they also mention looking at if there's things we identify, maybe looking at some other ways to fund it, so non-traditional public sources of revenue, which I think is nice for us to look at, not looking at what we're necessarily constrained with already, but maybe some sort of innovative financing in the private sector as well. So, developing the service plan concepts. And in this, they do recommend doing a core design retreat, so getting everyone together who, this is the one from the city back in 2016. And we had people from, whether they were planners, different perspectives who all are maybe related to transit, getting together to do the design.
Adrian, do they have suggestions in a virtual environment for that? Do they have specific?
Yeah, I think all this is going to be virtual.
Yeah.
Right there you go. Host a retreat in a virtual format.
Retreat in a virtual format. There, I see.
Yeah. And it says the key outcome of this is more about understanding of how and why recommendations are done. All right, and these are just examples. They did something similar in other cities. And then they have concept engagement. So that's doing a little bit of service concept outreach for the public, stakeholders, and any elected officials. And that's nice for them to also be understanding of what the core groups have worked on. And then recommending doing a survey as well, developing the draft plan. And they do have an optional one on here, which was not in the scope. It was actually in the original scope where I had a decent amount of outreach. They actually added that back in for doing more web surveys and a paper survey as well, and then some additional presentations. I have some follow-up questions about that. I don't know if we necessarily need that, but they do have it in there, and you guys can read through that extent of if we think we need a heightened level of outreach. And I think a big piece of that is they said that the transit vision plan was done, maybe about 5 years ago. I may be speaking wrong, but I don't know if there was as much in public engagement for the second phase. So I think they're thinking that it would be nice to bring it all together, almost like an implementable plan, and get feedback on the draft version at that point. And then final plan. As far as costs, this one, including the optional piece, came in right at 199, like right at 200. And the other one for Kimberly Horn, I believe, was 185.
So Adrian, would you say the outreach was one of the prevailing reasons that Michael Baker was the favored contractor?
Why are they in favor? I just went through Micro Baker, and I like their technical approach. They spent almost all 21 pages saying how they were going to do it, opposed to, I felt like Kimberly Horn didn't lay it out as technical. Of their 17 pages, only 4 pages were about approach. And I did feel like with Baker, they explained each of those tasks I was asking, and they hit every single thing that, even if I didn't say it specifically in the scope, I felt like they still understood what I was trying to get at with all of the different tasks. Any, I guess, thoughts? I know that one was pretty long.
So you will be able to, and these are the only 2 you're going to be requesting? Or did you request
Those are
from
the only
all?
2 that we requested. Yeah, I just felt like we've worked with them so much, both Kimberly Horn and Baker, related to the GRTC network. It just seemed like they had the experience to go with it and kind of hit the ground running on such a short turnaround.
Okay, so you would send this out to each of the members of this group, and would like to have what level of feedback and when?
Yeah, if you want to, I'll send it out. If you guys want to provide feedback to make sure certain things are included as we move forward. The Baker contract is, of course, the recommended one from GRTC, but like the things Dorona pointed out, if there's things that you guys also want to point out to make sure it's definitely included in the conversation. But I mean, this isn't just, we've got the scope and we've got a proposal, we're moving forward. This is still going to be a group working effort together.
Right.
Adrian, this is Ken. When would you like to have that feedback?
Today is Monday. If you could get it to me, I don't know, but I'm going to be fast, Wednesday.
That's not going to work for me.
That's not going to work.
Really? What works for you guys as far as feedback, timing?
Maybe Friday.
Friday? Okay.
And I just wanted to clarify the time frame. The draft is due when, and the final is due?
What's the draft?
The draft plan.
Oh, for the actual time frame
Right.
for the whole project, yes. December 31st is the 2 alternatives are due, and then the whole thing is due by the end of March. They do have in theirs, Baker, if we do the public engagement enhancement piece, the optional one, then that they said does extend it. I think they said 3 weeks.
3 weeks, okay. That's what I was just breezing through. I thought I saw March as their final. And that was pretty comparable to what Kimberly Horn was saying.
Yes.
Okay.
March is the goal for both of them.
Okay. All right, so that will go out to everyone that's here, as well as those that are not. That would include Joe Vidunas and Tiffany Dubinsky as well.
Tiffany's on the line.
Oh, is she? Oh, there she is.
Yes,
I
just
didn't
jumped
have
from
my
another
screen
call.
fully open. Hi, Tiffany.
Good afternoon. My apologies for being late.
So were you able to hear the
Dorona, I
discussion?
have a question. I have a question for Dorona.
Yes.
When you talk about equity credit, what do you mean by that?
Okay. So in what I found, that when we were presented with the service agreement, somewhat like the transportation service agreement that Chesterfield and Henrico gets, we had opposition against that, in that we give funds based on a grant, and we don't enter into any contract other than the grant contract with GRTC. So we don't sole source, we don't go through that procurement process. And so that's one element. And then when I talked about an equity credit, since we have documented for at least 40 years that we have contributed to the capital and to the expenses of GRTC, and it would be difficult for us to then say, okay, we are on the same level field with those who are 2 years into participating, those even at 20 years of participating, and what levels and what contributions to the system that the city has made. We would like to be recognized for that contribution. And again, in some form of, if we move to a unified model, some form of credit that recognizes those contributions over time, whether depreciated and whether or not extended for a number of years into the future.
Okay, I didn't understand that as far as it relates to the regional transit plan.
Well, in the plan,
concrete
she
example.
says that they are going to look at the service agreement and getting us, that's why I said it's a fundamental issue we have at the city, that if the regional transit plan intends to recommend a format of funding to GRTC that is different from what we currently do in our grant structure, then there becomes a fundamental conversation that we have to have that involves our continued and previous contributions to the system as a whole.
Okay.
Okay, are there any other questions of each other or of Adrian? And I think we could certainly pose questions throughout the week as they come forward, before Friday. I certainly think there might be some need for clarification throughout the week for individual members.
And Adrian, this is Diana. I didn't hear Lisa's comment all the way on regard to the public participation, but is that something that I see the interaction it has with GRTC and the stakeholders, but I really don't see that interaction. I see it preparing information for the public. I'm just trying to figure out if we try to bring it, in March and say, this is what we need for the budget wise, but yet it really hasn't gone to any of the citizens. How is that? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, how the process ties into and how public involvement will be in the recommendations that we have to then present to our board to be, our council to be approved.
Yeah, I mean, even if the optional level of engagement is not chosen, there is still a decent amount of public engagement throughout the whole process. Even with the draft plan development, draft plan alternatives, there is outreach related to that for getting feedback on the plans and the perspectives. And I don't have it up right now, but you'll see that in there. And then the other one is just after we've come in and decided on that, doing another level of outreach after that.
Okay. Yeah, just when I scanned, I didn't see, I saw stakeholders, but I didn't see public.
Public, yeah.
Adrian, do you anticipate a lot of that public engagement being virtual? Or do you see
I do
as well?
Yes.
I think it'll primarily, it looks like they have paper version outreach on there too. I did see that in there. So I guess they're doing a mixture of both to make sure they get information on the ground. But I think more of it's probably going to be virtual than it used to be. I think virtual meaning a lot of surveys online.
Right.
And then of course GRTC plans on doing, Carrie Rose Pace will be very involved. We want to do our own high level of outreach related to it. And when we do outreach, if it is decided that we're making tweaks to a line or doing enhanced line, we would do our normal high level outreach related to that as well. So this is not, in addition to that, GRTC will still be doing its normal outreach efforts.
Oh yes, I agree. I just mean, we're asking for the money and then we don't even know if the public will want it or support it.
Right.
It's a challenge between the tight time frame and the pandemic. those two factors are going to be sort of a challenge in terms of, doing a lot of in-person public outreach.
For sure.
Yeah, and just for us, if anything would even be like put in front of our council, I think that those are pretty attended by the public. But we're right now, I think in 2 weeks, whatever would be going on the December agenda was already due, and then December is at January, and so then you're looking at potentially March. You're then probably at May or June before you could even get on the agenda to even potentially share some of the things with the public, because I think that they have a big base in itself. But any help that we can definitely provide, I'll do what I can.
All right, and as I already pointed out, that the funding aspect, the 200,000 out of the CVTA transit funds, has been approved by the CVTA board at their meeting on Friday. And it was for consulting services and public outreach support in the development of the FY22 Regional Transit Plan. This will be acknowledged into the CVTA Finance Committee on November 9th, which is coming up this Monday. So they don't, as my understanding is, they don't take separate action because it's already been approved by the full board. So it sounds like the next steps are really to review these two proposals and have a dialogue during the week with any questions that each of you may have to Adrienne. She'll be the center point, and any comments back to Adrienne by Friday.
Barb, I have one thing.
Uh-huh.
Even much like how the scope moved along, and then again, we haven't received the documents, then we're given a timeline to review them by Friday. And then the next time I look, it's like consensus by the group. So I think that somehow we have to ensure that we do have consensus, and
Correct.
that, or else I don't think that, the group's name should be used, that it's consensus, unless again, we're able to come up with it. So I did see that there was an action item today for that consensus. And I think that was changed based on us wanting to look at the proposals themselves. So I don't know if it just needs to be on the Friday because if we submit the comments on Friday, is she going to get something? Are we just supposed to say, okay, if these changes are made, we consent? Or are we going to get something back and then we send out an email that says that we can,
that this is what has been changed or suggested?
Or what the final one is, so that we can, give her a chance to look at the comments, see if there's any changes, or her make, and then, something out to us to then we can reply, we consent with this.
Right.
I think is, but otherwise, I think that you guys have gotten away with one consent that I didn't truly consent. And that I would like some way in.
That we can more formalize it. Right.
Yes, please. Thank you.
So I think I will work with Adrienne on that to make sure that we get it back out to the group, and hopefully Friday you'll be there all day, Adrienne, and we can consult, and I can also bring Chet into this conversation. Does that sound
But Dorona,
reasonable?
what exactly are you looking for in terms of?
Well, again, the agenda for today said that this group would gather consensus to, then something to the TAC. I don't even have it exactly in front of me at the moment. And I'm just trying to ensure that we're going to make comments. And then if you're not going to incorporate it in the comments and it's going to be the documents that we have right now, then, we can seek consensus right now. But if we are going to look at them and provide some comments, then I'm looking for a follow-up with me to say, here's the final, and do you consent with this draft or with this?
Or with the selection of the consultant. Right. So I thought, my understanding is that the basic scope had already been reviewed and it was reflected in the RFP that went to the two consultants. What we're
Yeah, but I didn't even know.
looking at their two proposals and comparing them or contrasting them.
Yeah, that was done. Yeah, I'm talking about the proposal. And again,
Correct.
you may not be asking for anything. You may just be FYIing us with the information right now, and that's fine.
Right.
But per the
Right.
agenda, it says action recommendation for TAC. And so I'm just saying,
Right. Yeah, I think that's just how we go forward is really what we're looking for today. And that I think has been established. We will
Yeah.
provide
I think
comments
Chet
back
was
to
thinking we're going to
Adrian.
have a lot more back and forth conversation, and we would touch on any sort of, I guess, add-ins or changes if there was any, or even just explanations
Questions.
of why that approach was made, knowing that GRTC already made the kind of the recommendation for the Baker because of just the technical approach of the proposal, and them having worked with us a lot. So I think that he was thinking more of a high level, I think, consent that the path to move forward with Baker is something that the group, but I do want to hear everyone's actual recommendations.
Yeah, because
and
you
I know
are
guys haven't
seeing
looked
it.
at it at all.
Yeah, you are seeing both of them for the first time right now. So I think that's advisable.
Barb, this is Nicole.
But I wanted to just be, go ahead.
I just
Sorry,
want to
Nicole.
know. I just want to note that a selection today by this group is not a requirement for action by
Right.
TAC. So.
Right. That's what I'm.
oh no, and I completely agree. But then I don't want then later to say that this group had consensus.
Right.
So
Right.
either way, it's fine with me.
We'll circle back on Friday when we've heard back from everyone. Okay, Adrian.
That's
Any
fine. Does
other-
anyone else have, I guess, any concerns related to that? Certain, I guess, effort to have a consensus via email? Or just know that I've, I guess, included your comments and respond back with the moving forward version?
And that would be as of Friday, end of business on Friday. As long as she gets those comments with adequate time to review and be able to respond to individual questions.
Hey, Barbara,
Okay.
this is Tiffany.
Yes.
Just so I apologize that I was not present for a lot of the discussion.
Mhm.
But so my understanding is that there were two proposals that
Correct.
GRTC received based off of the scope that we all had kind of reviewed from our October meeting. And so we are now given an opportunity to review those proposals and provide any comments to Adrian by Friday.
Correct.
Is that correct? So I actually I understand Darona's point where she wants it to be clear that there has been an opportunity for this working group to be able to review the proposals, but it should just be noted that this is GRTC's decision.
Correct.
And that they have ultimately done this work. So there wasn't a actual consensus process that typically the TPO has followed when they've
Right.
done similar working efforts. And so I think that maybe needs to be like a reassurance. For me, I would like a reassurance that if there are any comments, there may not be, but if there's anything that should be noted to the working group ahead of when we'll do an update to TAC on this item. Is that the intent next after
Correct.
we've kind of reviewed
That's
this?
correct. Yes.
Okay, so I think that's where for myself, and I don't want to speak for Dorona, but I would just want to be assured that whatever comments were sent forward, they were at least noted, received, and would somehow be reflected or considered when this item is presented to TAC at the next meeting.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, Tiffany. Okay. So the next, my understanding is that you've been meeting kind of loosely on a monthly basis. So the next public transportation work group meeting is still to be scheduled. Are there any thoughts that we should, and I think we've done this. Nicole, help me out. Have we done this by doodle poll, or how have we set the meetings?
We have done it by doodle poll in the past. I don't know if Chet already has a date in mind. So we'll definitely reach out either by doodle poll or.
Right. He did not have a date in mind, so I just wanted to make sure that in a in a reasonable format, we will be back in touch with you for a doodle poll to set the next meeting. Okay. All right. So the steps that we need to take today is return any questions, comments to Adrienne by Friday. She will FYI back any kind of response that needs to be for clarification for the group, and then move forward with the recommendation that this is a GRTC engagement, and we'll notify the group as well, so that it can go forward to TAC. Oh, you're on and off.
Well, thank you guys. Appreciate it. I'll send it right after this meeting so you have enough time.
Okay, very good. And then the CVTA Finance Committee meets on Monday, but they will just have that as a matter of information for their meeting. So is there any other business that needs to come before the group today? Well, hearing none, I think it's time to adjourn. So thank you all for your time, and look forward to reviewing the proposals. Thank you, Adrienne.
Bye.
Thanks, Barbara.